Hey everyone, Elijah here, back with another video. Max hits. You probably heard a lot of people talking about max hits. Max hits this, max hits that, but what's all the fuss about? I get to deal 1 more damage? Sure, that's nice, but that's not that big a deal, right? Well, today I'm going to dive in and show you what's so important about it, and why you might feel like you're having a much tougher time learning content than the big streamers and YouTubers with max gear and max stats. First, I want to ask you a question. Look at these two setups. Which one do you think has better DPS? Setup 1 has 75 strength, piety, bandage chestplate, tassets, the Needer's Note face guard, primordial boots, a Vernic defender, infernal cape, blade of Seldor, the altar ring, and an amulet of torture. And setup 2 has 83 strength, piety, a fighter torso, dragon defender, obsidian plate legs, fire cape, dragon boots, abyssal whip, normal Needer's Note helmet, an amulet of fury, barrow's gloves, and an active thrall. I will get to the answer from the question I left off before the intro, but first, I just want to say once again that you're all absolute legends. Thanks so much for your support on last video. As promised in last video, I'm going to pick a winner to give away a bond to, so I'm going to roll that in the comments now. So I'm just going to pull up the site here. This will roll from all the comments. Yes, I'm a person. Come on. And the winner is... Shows Timer. Congratulations, I've added you in game. You have 1 week to claim your bond, or otherwise I'll re-roll it off to another winner. Add me, Elijah OSRS, and I'll be sure to give you your bond. Alright, onto the main topic of today's video, max hits. So you remember those two gear setups I showed you earlier? If you answered set 2 was the best DPS, you'd be right, which sounds utterly insane at first. Set 1's DPS works out to be 8.64, and Set 2's DPS works out to be 9.04. So I'll get into a little bit about why that matters later, but basically it's a 4.74% DPS increase for less than 1/100th of the cost. So how can this be, and why does it matter? You probably heard your favorite YouTuber or streamer, or me in a previous video, stats to 85s or 90s ideally. Every max hit counts. Talk about how this item gives a max hit, or maxes are important, or they get excited when a new item comes into the game that gives you a max hit, and they say it's too OP because you can get too many max hits. Or you've probably heard people saying, you can easily do this with budget gear, and then often provide examples of them doing so. But then when you go away and try it in that same budget gear, it seems way harder. You take more damage, you kill the boss way slower, and sure, maybe you beat yourself up a bit because the streamer's more experienced, they're better at the game, of course they killed it easier than you did, but I don't think that's entirely the case. It can be a big difference, these max hits and stats, and I'm going to show you why. From these two gear setups, there are two things that I want you to take away. Have a guess what they are. 1, stats matter way more than gear. I'll bring this point up again later, but you can see here that just a couple of strength levels outweighs 500 mil worth of gear. Point 2. Gear that is 1 or 2 rungs below complete best in slot is almost as good as actual best in slot. The fighter torso has the same strength bonus as the bandage chestplate, and dragon boots only has 1 strength bonus less than primordial boots. 100k, 35 mil. Just to make this point even clearer, here is setup 3 and 4, with setup 3 having rigor and almost no gear and a blowpipe, versus setup 4 with full Missouri. You can see how just rigor and a couple of range levels can make a massive difference in terms of DPS outcome. Hopefully this comparison explained just how important stats are. Having 99 strength is way more important than having 10 bill worth of gear. However, I think this also leads into a fallacy that some of the higher level community face. They go, you can easily do X content with budget gear, quit complaining about money. And as we've seen, this is true. Stats mean more than gear. Budget gear really isn't that big of a difference than complete max. However, those players with max gear often have 99s in every combat stat, so they're comparing max stats budget gear, not base 75s with budget gear, and that really is a massive difference. For example, at General Grado, max melee with full Torva and a scythe versus budget gear base 75s is 8.59 DPS versus 2.18 DPS. This is a 294% increase. This is obscene. The gap is massive. It's 3 times your damage. This gap also applies with the increased stats when streamers or other YouTubers use budget gear. The budget DPS setup with the fighter torso at Bandos is 5.7 DPS with max stats and a thrall. That reduces the gap from 300% down to only 50%. This is massive. This is not on the same playing field. So if you feel like you're struggling when you watch some guides and it seems super easy, and then you go and attempt it and it feels like you're doing way less damage, the fight's taking way longer, and you're taking way more damage, this is why. Okay, we learned about how stats impact our max hits and how gear impact our max hits. But why do max hits really matter? You kill the boss a little slower. Big deal, right? You just need to play for a little longer. Well, not quite. Because of the way RuneScape rolls damage, each max hit moves your average hit higher and reduces the chance of you hitting a lower number like a 1. So each max hit is around 2 to 4% of a DPS increase. This is why thralls are so good, by the way, because they ignore defenses entirely and offer a 1.5% max hit, often completely for free. So if we take our DPS before a General Grado, for example, the budget low stats setup kills the boss in 122 seconds on average, while the high gear max stats setup kills the boss in 34 seconds. Not only does this affect the kill speed itself to make you earn more profit per hour because you're killing more Grados, it also means you earn more profit per kill because your super combat potions, prayer potions, and food is used in a shorter amount. The budget lower stat player has to drink a dose of super combat every 2.5 kills, while the absolute max player in max gear has to use a super combat dose every 8.8 kills. So this means you kill the boss faster, you get more kills per hour, which increases your profits, but you also lose less supplies and increase your profits even further. Okay, but surely with more glass cannon gear, you take more damage, right? So there's a bit of trade-off. Maybe getting some tank gear, which is a bit cheaper, would be worth it, right? Well again, if we apply these setups at General Grado, here I have a setup of full Justicia and a licensed Spirit Shield, and this kills the boss in 85.5 seconds and takes about 1.83 damage per second. So if you multiply that out over the total kill, on average, it'll take about 156.4 damage. A full Torva setup kills the boss in 48 seconds, deals 3.35 damage a second, and takes a total of 160 damage. As you can see by the damage taken, it's very similar, with the glass cannon build actually barely taking that much more damage than the pure tank build. However, this opens up a critical thing that I think many people miss. If the kill time is shorter, the boss is easier. If the kill time of the boss on average is 48 seconds for the higher DPS setup, it opens up the game more mechanically. If, say for example, you can focus and flick even one of the minions in a 48-second window and make no mistakes, but if you had to do the same in an 85-second window, you would make a mistake. In the higher DPS setup, this would actually reduce the Torva's damage down to 1.57 damage taken per second, and the total damage would get reduced down to 76 total damage. So if you only really have to focus for 48 seconds and do a bit more mechanical work, you can actually take less damage than the tank setup, and quite drastically so. This means the faster you kill the boss, the easier you make the boss. If you're killing it faster, you have to focus on it for less time, there's less chance for you to make a mistake, but if the tank build wanted to flick a minion, it would have to do so for nearly a minute and a half, while the DPS build only has to do it for 50 seconds, while getting better durability, better profits, and more supplies for a longer trip. As they say, the best form of CC is death. This concept also applies to learning content for the first time, and I feel like this is something that high-level PVMers often miss. Top-level PVMers often learn content in the completely best gear with max stats for their first ever kills. And of course they die many times while learning the new strategies, but eventually they master it and are now capable of doing it in the lower budget gear. But learning new content you've never done in budget gear with lower stats is tremendously more difficult as a newer player. It just is. So we've learned a lot about max hits. Your main takeaway, stats are far and away the most important thing. Focusing on gear upgrades is good, but 99 strength is more impactful than all the gear in the world at level 70 strength. Secondly, don't feel bad if learning content with lower stats seems really hard and YouTubers or streamers make the content seem far easier. It is a lot harder for you. You're not going crazy, you're not just a bad player, it's legitimately substantially more difficult for you. So if you prefer to build up your stats a bit more, or maybe build up your bank a bit more before really deep diving into PVM, that's totally fine and completely understandable. I hope this video helped you and let you learn something about your account and what you can do to get more out of it. If there's something you learned in this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I really appreciate you, and I hope I see you in the next video.